Oh, good evening. I'm the Maven of the Eventide, and welcome to, this series really needs a name. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be a series when I started sharing my vampire library with you. I guess I could just say, welcome to the vampire library, but it needs like a punny name, and I suck at puns, except for that one. I'm sorry. Anyway, books! Vampire books! There are some very generous people in our audience who like to send me vampire books to my post office, and then I get to share them with you, and then we get to read them together in my vampire book club, which I host on my vampire Discord. Yeah, I'm like the Dr. Evil of vampires. Instead of everything being evil, it's just vampires, and also evil, I guess, by default. Anyway, books! So what have I received new in my stack of books? Again, in no particular order. I usually arrange them by size, because when you're stacking up piles of vampire books on the floor next to your bookcase so that you don't get them mixed up with the vampire books that you've already shared with your YouTube audience, stacking things from biggest to smallest is the most stable. This is one of the Necroscope series books by Brian Lumley. I already talked to you about the first Necroscope book, just called Necroscope. This is book number 5 in the series, Dead Spawn, which someone sent to me. Thank you. I've never read this one. Like the vampires it so full-bloodedly portrays, Brian Lumley's Necroscope series just gets stronger. Harry Coe, fearless vampire hunter. There's a maniacal murderer on the loose, brutally slaughtering young women with a ferocity that rivals that of the vampires Harry Coe has spent his life combating. The Necroscope's been asked to solve the crimes. Asked by the dead spirits of the madman's victims. Now I just need to get books 2, 3, and 4. And then, all the rest. Mina by Marie Coralli. The Dracula story continues. I guess this is a Dracula sequel? About Mina? I still feel his blood in me. I still feel that passion his touch aroused. Oh, it's a sexy Dracula sequel about Mina. Dracula's public domain. Any person can write a sequel to it and publish it. I guess technically that counts as fan fiction, but you can do it. It is allowed. She tasted the blood of Dracula and lived to tell the tale. Yes, that's true. In the original Dracula, Mina tastes Dracula blood. She starts turning into a hemi-demi semi-vampire, and then when Dracula is slain at the end of the book, she turns back to a normal human. What if she didn't? In Bram Stoker's immortal classic Dracula, an extraordinary woman named Mina Harker became the living object of a vampire's obsession. He came to her in the night, like a demon lover, opening a vein in his chest and pressing her tender lips to the wound. Consumed by passion, Mina drank of his blood, and from that moment on, his seductive power filled her senses with strange, forbidden longings. Only one thing saved her soul from eternal damnation, a stake driven through the heart of Count Dracula. But was the spell really broken? Could a mortal woman return to an ordinary life of marriage after tasting the exquisite pleasures of Dracula's desire? I guess once you go Drac, you never go back. In this sensual and haunting sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Dark Prince's most famous mistress reveals the untold story of a timeless love that refused to die. Chilling, fast-paced, a real page-turner, says P.N. Elrod, author of The Vampire Files, and also Istrad, which we have discussed on this channel before. If she likes it, maybe you will too. Mina is one of those strong female characters of Victorian literature that, I would not mind reading more about. Fiends by Jonathan Harris. Death Soars on the Soft Wings of Night. America's premier novelist of terror, says Stephen King. He's the author of Son of Endless Night. So is this a first novel, or is this like part of a series? In the frozen pit of blackest hell, death sleeps. Ravishing beyond words, evil beyond our darkest dreams of Satan, her eyelids flutter. Ooh, death is a lady, love it. Rising from her pit, she wakes her vampire brood and frees them from their ancient graves. Now, no one is safe. No one from the unwashed children of Eve. Well, I guess when Eve didn't wash her children, they became vampires. I wonder what they're going to do and why, and who the characters are in this book and why I should care about them. That's not a very satisfying book summary. I guess I'll just have to read the book and find out. This is one of those books that I will put up to read in our vampire book club, and you can vote and decide if you want to read this book or whatever else it's up against when we have our vote every month. Fiend by Jamiah Jefferson and its sequel. Jefferson's bloodsuckers are the most exciting and relevant since Poppy's Eve Brights, says Fangoria. Are they? Tell me more. In 19th century Italy, young Orfeo Ricciari teeters on the brink of adulthood. His new tutor instructs him in literature and poetry during the day and guides him in the world of sensual pleasure at night. Oh, he has a sexy teacher. But a journey to Paris will teach young Orfeo much more, for in Paris he will become a vampire, as you do when you go to Paris. It's the thing to do. Comparisons to Anne Rice are inevitable because he's a guy who goes to Paris and turns into a vampire, probably. But Jefferson's writing is simultaneously tougher and more elegant. Told in his own words, this is the story of the life, death, rebirth, and education of a vampire. No one else could probably describe the shadowy existence, the endless hunger, the heightened senses, or the amazing power of the undead. No one else could recount the passing of the years and the slow realization of what it means to grasp immortality, to live on innocent blood, to be a fiend. Oh, a vampire bio book. That's very Anne Rice, so I will probably like this. And the sequel, Wounds. Vampire Daniel Bloom imagines himself the most ruthless savage creature in New York City, if not the world. He once feasted on the blood of Nazi Germany and left a string of shattered lovers behind him. But now the usual thrill of seduction and murder has begun to wear off, until he meets Sybil, the strange former stripper whose mind is the first he's ever found that he cannot read or manipulate. Is this a sequel? It's not Orfeo, unless Orfeo changes his name to Daniel. This book came out after Fiends, so maybe they're unrelated. I don't know. I should probably look that up. They use the same font, so that's why I assume they're related. Oh, and also, by Jamiah Jefferson, is Voice of the Blood, which was, I believe, Jamiah's first novel, because this says, it is not often I read a first novel and say, wow, but I was stunned by Voice in the Blood. Jamiah Jefferson is a fresh and exciting new voice in horror. So yeah, this is the first novel. The undead walk among us. The ordinary life of a grad student was so boring for Ariane. She was desperate for some change, some excitement to shake things up. She had no idea she was only one step away from a whole new world. A world of darkness and decay, of eternal life and eternal death. But once she fell prey to Ricciari, she would learn much more about this world than she ever dreamed possible. Okay, so that's the name of the vampire in the other book. So I bet that other book is like a prequel, his life story of how he became a vampire after he was introduced in this book. I'm putting it together. More than anyone should dare to know, if they value their soul. For Ricciari is the world of the undead, the vampire, a world far beyond the myths and legends that living think they know, a world even more horrifying than the living could suspect. From the clubs of San Francisco to a deserted Hollywood hotel known as Rotting Hall, the denizens of this land of darkness hold sway over the night. But as seductive and erotic as these predators may be, Ariane will soon discover that a little knowledge can be a very dangerous thing indeed. Voice of the Blood, Fiend, Wounds. Thank you for sending me this set. I'm intrigued. Especially with the Anne Rice comparisons. I love Anne Rice books, so maybe I'll love these too. They definitely sound a lot more urban fantasy than Anne Rice, at least the first one and probably the third one do. Though the historical backstory one is probably much more in that vein. Moon Called by Patricia Briggs. This is, I believe, a werewolf book. A Mercy Thompson novel. It's the first Mercy Thompson novel, but it also features vampires. At least it better. Werewolves can be dangerous if you get in their way, but they'll leave you alone if you are careful. They are very good at hiding their natures from the human population, but I'm not human. I know them when I meet them, and they know me too. Mercy Thompson's sexy next-door neighbor is a werewolf. She's tinkering with the VW bus at her mechanic shop that happens to belong to a vampire. But then, Mercy Thompson is not exactly normal herself, and her connection to the world of things that go bump in the night is about to get her in a whole lot of trouble. A new and dazzling world of werewolves, shapeshifters, witches, and vampires. Very stock and trade, modern, urban fantasy. I've heard a lot of things about the series. People ask me all the time if I would look at it and review it. So finally, I have it, and finally I can read the first book in the series and see what I think. Thank you for sending this to me. Now, I got a message from one of my followers saying, I found a new vampire series that I want to send you, and I'm going to send you the whole series. And what came was a whole lot of books. And I believe this set is the series that they were mentioning. First book is called Fat Vampire by Johnny B. Truant. And there are 6 books in this Fat Vampire series. First one is Fat Vampire. Second is Fat Vampire 2, Tastes Like Chicken. Fat Vampire 3, All You Can Eat. Fat Vampire 4, Harder, Better, Fatter, Stronger. Fat Vampire 5, Fat Apocalypse. And Fat Vampire 6, Survival of the Fattest. So what is this about? When overweight treadmill salesman Reginald Baskin finally meets a coworker who doesn't make fun of him, it's just his own bad luck that tech guy Maurice turns out to be a 2,000-year-old vampire. Poor Reginald, the only person who's not a total asshole to you is a vampire? And when Maurice turns Reginald to save his life, it's just Reginald's own further bad luck that he wakes up to discover he's become the slowest, weakest, most out-of-shape vampire ever born, doomed to heal to his corpulent self for all eternity. Oh, does he not like being fat? I guess. As Reginald struggles with the downsides of being a fat vampire, too slow to catch people to feed on, mocked by those he tries to glamour, assaulted by his intended prey, and left for undead, he discovers in himself rare powers that few vampires have. And just in time, too, because the Vampire Council might just want his head for being an inferior representative of their race. Fat Vampire is the story of an unlikely hero who, after having an imperfect eternity shoved into his grease-stained hands, must learn to turn the afterlife's lemons into tasty lemon danishes. Oh, I really hope this is not written in a fat-phobic way. I would like to think that the author is probably a fat person themselves and this is own voices, but the back of book summary is not giving me hope. And I don't know if this is the sort of thing that we need a content warning for fat phobia and fat shaming, or if it's something that's going to be well handled and a great protagonist who, has flaws but learns and grows or something. Oh, a note about this book. I'm one of the 3 hosts of a podcast called Better Off Undead, which you can find at betteroffundeadshow.com and all the usual podcast places. And on episode 6 of that podcast, we asked the question, if a vampire offered to turn you into one of his kind, would you accept? Dave, our resident fat guy and proud of it, said that he'd take the deal. My co-host Sean and I said that maybe that wouldn't be such a great idea for Dave, because if you're out of shape when you're turned, you might stay out of shape for all eternity. So I wrote a whole series of books about that single dumb idea, and what you're about to read is the first of them. Enjoy. Are these books Dave approved? Because if Dave is a fat guy and proud of it, but you're like, no, Dave, you shouldn't be proud. Look how horrible it will be. Has anyone read these books? Am I going to be repulsed when I read them? I was getting all excited for good fat people representation in the vampire genre, but I'm a little concerned. Be careful with these books. When I actually read them, I'll let you know. We'll have a talk. It'll be an interesting talk, I'm sure. It will be a talk. However, the point of the story is that these were not the only 6 books that this person sent me. And when this person sent them to me, this person told me that they hadn't read the books or they weren't familiar with the books at all. They were just intrigued by them and wanted to know what I would think of them. So that's why they sent them to me. So yeah, I'll let you know what I think of them, all right. But they also sent me every single other book, I think, that was called Fat Vampire, even though it's not by the same author and not part of the same series. So let's take a look at those. This is Fat Vampire by Adam Rex, which I have actually read. I borrowed it from the library about 4 or 5 years ago, and I read it, and it was cute. I liked it. It's a young adult book about a teenage boy who becomes a vampire, and he is overweight, and it's a comedy, so there are fat jokes, but it didn't come off to me as fat phobic in the way that those ones are coming off as fat phobic. And I know Adam Rex is a very fabulous children's author. I love his illustrated books. He did Frankenstein Makes a Sandwich, one of my favorite spooky gothic books, which also has vampires, and The Phantom of the Opera. I have talked about that before on the Vampire Library. Now I actually own a copy of Fat Vampire by Adam Rex, so thank you for sending this to me. A never coming of age story. It's been so long since I've read it that I don't quite remember if it's of needing a content warning or not, but here's the summary. Doug Lee is undead quite by accident. Attacked by a desperate vampire, he finds himself cursed with being fat and 15 forever. When he has no luck finding some goth chick with a vampire fetish, he resorts to sucking the blood of cows under the cover of the night, but it's just not the same. Then he meets a new Indian exchange student and falls for her. Hard. Yeah, he wants to bite her, but he also wants to prove himself to her. But like the laws of life, love, and high school, the laws of vampire existence are complicated. It's not as easy as studying Dracula, especially when the star of Vampire Hunters is hot and on your trail in an attempt to boost ratings. Searing, hilarious, and always unexpected, Fat Vampire is a satirical tour de force from one of the most original writers in fiction today. One thing I do remember about this book is that he's telling his best human friend about how he got turned into a vampire and stuff, like the one human he's confided in. And he keeps lying and saying that was a sexy vampire lady that turned him. And then the awful reveal was that it was a guy that turned him. And they're like, ew, that's kind of gay. And I remember being like, about that. It was very teenage boy, white America in that sense. But I also remember it being funny, though I didn't love it as much as I do like this author's children's books. Continuing the theme, we have Fat White Vampire Blues by Andrew Fox and the sequel, Bride of the Fat White Vampire. He's undead, overweight, and can't get a date. Vampire, Nosferatu, creature of the night, whatever you call him, Jules Duchamp has lived, so to speak, in New Orleans far longer than there have been drunk co-eds on Bourbon Street. Weighing in at a whopping 450 pounds, swelled up on the sweet, rich blood of people who consume the fattest diet in the world, Jules is thankful he can't see his reflection in a mirror. Oh no, is he another reluctant fat person? When he turns into a bat, he can't get his big old butt off the ground. What's worse, after more than a century of being undead, he's watched his neighborhood truly go to hell, and now a new vampire is looking to drive him out altogether. See, Jules has always been an equal opportunity kind of vampire, and while he would admit that the blood of a black woman is sweeter than the blood of a white man, Jules never drank more than his fair share of either. Enter Melise X. Young, cocky, and black, Melise warns Jules that his day of feasting on sisters and brothers are over. He tells Jules he'd better confine himself to white victims or else face the consequences. And then, just to prove he isn't kidding, Melise burns Jules' house to the ground. With the help of Maureen, the morbidly obese stripper vampire who made him, and Doodlebug, an undead crossdresser who, literally, flies in from the coast, Jules must find a way to contend with the hurdles that life throws at him, without getting a stake through the heart. It's enough to give a man the blues. Well, it does sound very true to New Orleans culture. I am very worried that it won't be handled well, because this summary is not giving me hope. This was published by Ballantine Books, which is a major publisher, unlike the other series, which was self-published by the podcast guy. But yeah, this definitely sounds fat-phobic. Like, why can't we have books about fat people that are just people being people? Like, why does it have to be about their fatness and that being a bad thing? Are you a fat person, Andrew Fox? Should you even be the one writing this book? This came out in 2003. So that was before a lot of fat discourse, so I don't have high hopes. Sequel, Bride of the Fat White Vampire. The wedding is going to be huge. After morphing into 187 very large white rats in the name of self-preservation, Jules Duchamp is back to his portly self, a member of that secret class of New Orleans citizens known as the Undead. Though he would like nothing better than to spend his nights raising hell and biting flesh in his beloved French Quarter, duty calls when an exclusive club of blue-blooded vampires demands that 450-pound cabbie find out who's attacking its young and beautiful members. Adding insult to injury, he has to enlist the help of former foe, a black vampire named Preston. That's not Melise X, so... What's a vampire to do? Without the love of a woman to ease his pain, Jules isn't convinced that his undead life is worth living. Oh no, is he also an incel? He doesn't desire Doodlebug. She may be a woman now, but Jules knew her back when she was just a boy. So it's also transphobic? I sure hope that he doesn't desire her just because he knew her when she was a child and now that's creepy to him and it has nothing to do with her transition. Any more than he longs for Daphne, a rat catcher who nourishes a crush the size of Jules. No, only Maureen will do. Once a beautiful stripper with nothing but curve after curve to her bodacious body, she's out. Ooh, spoiler. So he's trying to get Maureen. But I'm not going to tell you why he needs to, because that is a spoiler for the first book, if you ever are actually going to do this. Though I do like that Maureen's fat body is considered bodacious, and he likes her. So thank you for some positive fat representation. You want to read about a fat vampire that's not fat-phobic? You should read the Perishable series. It's they're short stories or novellas that are kind of put together into a sequence by Michael Williams, who is a local author here in Charlotte, and I've read this series, and it is well done. It's also recent. It's also published by Falstaff Books, which is the same publisher that published my book, The Company of Death. So, yeah, I recommend that series. I don't actually own that book because I read it in ebook, so I can't lift it up and show it to you, but go look it up. That one I will definitely vouch for. It's got a fat vampire protagonist who is also killing zombies. Very, very up my alley. And lastly, on this theme is Morbidly Obtuse, or How to Bit Friends and Influence People by Mark Ruin. Bit friends? Like how to meet friends, bit friends? Shouldn't be bite friends? Is that a joke I'm not getting? Oh, no, here it says How to Bite Friends and Influence People. There's a typo on the cover of this book. I think this is self-published. It's got that look to it, but it's got like a publisher's name that I've never heard of, but anyone can put a publisher's names on their book if they're self-published, so I'm not sure. If your idea of a vampire novel begins and ends with teenage angst and sparkles, then you may want to take a pass on this book. If you often find yourself salivating at the thought of a veiny, blood-soaked gore fest, then it's probably best if you moved right along. So it's not Twilighty or veiny gore fest. Sweet William Ambrose just isn't that kind of vampire. Billy's fat. He's unattractive. His back hurts and his knees ache when it rains. He feels every bit his age, all 187 years of it. Billy's seen and done a lot during his time on this planet, from witnessing the hardscrabble beginnings of the American West firsthand to the atrocities of World War II and the coke-fueled decadence of the 70s. He's rubbed elbows with the cannibals and giants, outlaws and rock stars, presidents and paupers. For the last 36 years, Billy has spent his time bedridden in a moldering, abandoned warehouse, subsisting on a diet of pizza and stray cats produced for him by an assistant. That is, until the authorities had to knock out one of the building's exterior walls just to get him out of the building. They say that life sucks and then you die, and maybe that's true. Well, for most of us, anyway. So is that the plot of the book? That they have to knock the wall out to get him out of the building? Like, what's he actually doing in this book? What's his goal? It's not a very informative book summary. And there's a typo on the cover. I do not have high hopes for this book. It does have punny chapter titles, though. Have any of you read this? Let me know what you think. Now I have, like, every book that has fat vampires or jokes thereon in the title. This is gonna be fun. We don't tolerate fat shaming here on Vampire Reviews, or transphobia, or casual racism, or whatever else that nonsense was. Guess I've been doing a lot of positive reviews lately. It's time to rip into some things. This is something I'm very excited about. This is The Vampire, with a Y, A Bedside Companion by Christopher Frayling. Sorry, it's so shiny. It's an ex-library book. It's got that classic library cover on it. So what this book is Christopher Frayling took all the vampire short stories like The Vampire with a Y by Polidori and all the things that came out before Dracula, and he arranged them in this anthology, but he also put a lot of notes. It's like a fiction analysis book. He goes into the evolution of vampires, the way these vampires influence each other, the effect they had on society, how all these vampires kind of led up to the environment where Dracula came to exist, which is very important research for my interests. And I'm very excited to read this. This is the original edition of the book that came out in the 70s. There's a updated version called like Polidori to Bram Stoker or something like that, that has a bit more pieces to it, that came out in 1992, and I need that version as well because this is missing those bits. But the last section is called Hemiosexuality, like blood, love. Psychopathia Sexualis by Richard Van Kraft Ebing. So it's an essay on the sexuality of vampires and how blood is connected to that, and like just really cool literary scholar type analysis stuff where I just eat up. Treatises on vampires, so just essays about vampires and their literary meanings, and I really want to read this. There are the short stories in here, which I've read most of them already, so I could skip those and get through this pretty quick and learn all the vampire facts that I need to know. I was looking for information from this book on the internet, and they have it on one of those websites. It's like, you can rent this book for an hour. And I'm like, I need more than an hour. But if you do a search for certain words, and it will let you see the preview pages, and you're like, flip to the next page, and like, this page not included in the preview. And I was like, no. Now I have it. And the person who sent it to me didn't even know I wanted it that badly. And it just showed up in my P.O. box, and I was so happy. New Orleans Vampires, History and Legend by Marita Woyward Crandall. And I've already talked about this book in my most recent video about my vampire mystery box, which was a vampire box that I received from the Boutique du Vampire shop in New Orleans that was just full of vampire goodies. And this book was in that box. In case you didn't watch that video, I'll tell you about it again because this book is really cool. So in New Orleans, they have legends of real vampires. If you go there, you can take a vampire tour where they talk about the historical impact of the vampire legends of the city. Not just fiction that was based in the city, but actual real legends of historical vampire sightings or problems or trials. And there's 3 main legends in the French Quarter. And in this book, she's done research on the history and origins of all 3 of those legends. And she says that she doesn't ruin the legends. She doesn't debunk them. In this book, she just gives you all the history and information that you could possibly want to know about these true vampire legends of the French Quarter of New Orleans. And she autographed it for me. It says, "To Maven, may the legends live on." Thank you. Of course, I had to get a copy of Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. Have you seen how thick this book is? Do you know what they're charging for this book? Technically a young adult book. Like $28? It's a brick. So this book is the brand new Twilight novel. And it is Twilight, the first book in the Twilight series, retold from Edward's point of view. And Stephanie Meyer started writing this book way back when Twilight was still relevant, so like 2009 or so. And she had a circle of beta readers who would, give her feedback on her work. And one of them leaked the chapters that she'd shared. And these went all over the internet and everyone read them. I read them because I was morbidly curious. And Stephanie Meyer was so upset by this leak and so disheartened by it that she just lost interest in writing this version of the novel, and she stopped. She just gave up on it and focused on other projects. But apparently she got her steam back because this just came out this year, and it was a big reveal and a big surprise. They kept it secret and surprised us all with it. And some people were like, really? That's your surprise? So, of course, I had to get it. It went on super sale online last month, and I should have included this in the last book video I made you, but it arrived the day after I made that video, so I didn't have time. Midnight Sun, it's got a pomegranate on the cover, which makes me think it's like a Hades Persephone thing going on. If that pomegranate is just on the cover because all vampire human romances are Death and the Maiden-ish, I will be very disappointed. I fully expect Edward to compare himself to Hades and Bella to Persephone and to really go hard on this metaphor in a completely inappropriate way because it isn't no way appropriate, but if he doesn't, I'll be very disappointed. I haven't read it yet. I'm probably going to see if my book club will read it with me. If you want to read it with me, join my Discord, join my book club, vote, and we'll do this together. It's a big one, but I'm sure it will be just as enjoyable as all other Twilight books. So much fun. The Grey House, A World of Contagion trilogy by Kat Stark. Natalia Dovisky lives in a world much like her own. However, once you peer beneath the surface, you find werewolves, vampires, mages, and slayers. Natalia learns early in life that not all slayers are good and not all hellspawn are evil. To avenge her mother's death, Natalia pursues Vincent in an attempt to infiltrate vampire society. Immediately drawn to the handsome vampire, she does as she must to gain his allegiance. Vincent Gray is not certain this human can be an asset, but their brief encounters leave him wanting more. She's all he could want in a partner, if only she can be convinced to leave her mortality behind. The Grey House is book 1 of the Grey House trilogy. It is based on a role-playing game, The World of Contagion, created by Travis Legge. Interesting, I've never heard of that role-playing game. And this is a very straightforward vampire romance novel. There's some dog prints on the cover, so I wonder if werewolves are a major part of this. They're part of the world, but the first in the trilogy. Oh, the person who sent it to me included this awesome card, which I saved because it had a wax seal and they wrote calligraphy on it. That was very cool. I always save all the letters everyone sends me. And the person who sent this to me said that Kat Stark, the author, is a friend of theirs. So this is their friend's book that they're vouching for. Vampire romance. Will she want to turn into a vampire to be with Vincent Gray? She better. Werewolf Smackdown by Mario Acevedo. And whoever sent this to me better not be trolling me with a werewolf book. There better be vampires in this book because you know how I feel about werewolves. They're vampires' rivals is how I feel. Oh, whew, okay. Felix Gomez, Latino vampire detective extraordinaire, tackles a dangerous werewolf cabal in the 5th installment of Mario Acevedo's satirical supernatural series. So if this is the 5th installment, where are parts 1 through 4? Why was this one sent to me and not the other parts? Is it because this is the one that has a vampire? The others don't? The other 4 books are Jailbait Zombie, The Undead Kama Sutra, X-Rated Bloodsuckers, The Nymphos of Rocky Flats. So if this is a detective series and the vampire is a detective, you should probably read the first one first. Why do I have the 5th one first? There must be a reason. I am curious. Let me know. A sure-to-be bloody civil war is brewing between rival werewolf factions, and P.I. Felix Gomez will do anything he can to make sure it doesn't explode into a vicious battle that engulfs all creatures living and dead. Between that, the sudden reappearance of an ex-girlfriend, and a gang of other vampires trying to take off his head, this is one rumble even a famed detective extraordinaire may not be able to handle. So I like that it's a Latino vampire PI, written by a Latino author, own voices, yes please, thank you. But tell me, do I need to read the other 4 books first before I read this one? Because if so, I will wait. Look for Me by Moonlight by Mary Downing Han. In a remote Maine inn, where Cinda is supposed to be reconnecting with her father and his new family, she is also falling in love for the first time. But this isn't a typical teenage romance. The object of her affection, Vincent Marathanos, is older and worldly, with pale aristocratic good looks, and he has a secret that could destroy Cinda's family unless she can free herself from love's deadly embrace. Love can be dangerous. So another vampire teen romance about a vampire named Vincent, because Vincent is obviously the best name for, spooky gothic heroes. Not that I'm biased. I have not heard of this teen vampire romance before. I like that it's a small book. I like books with interesting shapes and sizes, so this is a cute little square book. A deliciously spine-tingling story, but it's got a very romance novel cover with like a woman's neck and a man's lips, and love is in the air in my book recommendations tonight. I'm so excited for this. This is Fangs by Sarah Anderson, author of Sarah Scribbles, who is a webcomic artist who I'm sure you are familiar with. She is super awesome, and you've seen her everywhere. And she wrote a vampire werewolf romance comic that was online, at least most of it was, and now it's been published in this adorable book. Look, it's got black pages. It's got like this embossed cover. Oh, it's so cute. I love it so much. Everything Sarah Anderson does is amazing, and I did not read the whole comic online, so I really need to read to the end of it. So now I have the book, so now I can. Thank you. The Blood Countess, a novel by André Codrescu, not to be confused with the many other vampire books also titled The Blood Countess. So this may have been one of the first, the 90s, 1995. So is this one actually about the Blood Countess? The Blood Countess is the nickname of Countess Elizabeth Bathory of Hungary, who was famous for being afraid she was getting old, because women, am I right? So she bathed in the blood of virgins to try to keep herself young. And she was just a normal human adult countess who did this, a real person who did this. That is a historical figure, and people like to equate her with vampires because she did, bathe in human blood and committed a lot of murder. She was eventually arrested and convicted and kept under house arrest, so basically trapped in her castle, like in such a spooky gothic way, and just lived out her life in her castle under house arrest. And that's her story. So this is, there she is, Countess Elizabeth Bathory of Hungary. 1560 through 1613 was beautiful, well educated in the best traditions of the Renaissance, and wealthy beyond measure. She was a powerful woman in a century of powerful women. Her namesake, Queen Elizabeth, was her contemporary. Her court at Savar Castle hosted artists, scientists, poets, and musicians, but also witches, astrologers, alchemists, and poisoners. She was the subject of poems and paintings. She was loved and admired, but she was also complex, tormented, and perverse, and she may have been the most dreadful murderess in recorded history. Upon assuming her seat of power at the age of 16, the Countess set out upon a course of revelry and debauchery, aided by her spiritual advisor, Darvulia, and by her faithful bevy of overwrought maids. Eventually, time and excess of increasingly bizarre pleasures led the Countess to fear the loss of her beauty. She was advised by witches to take baths in the blood of virgins to regenerate her body. A long procession of young girls were chosen to spend the night with Elizabeth. Sometimes they were lavishly entertained, wrapped in silks and perfumed with rare oils before they were tortured and murdered by their mistress. At other times, the girls were killed quickly so that fresh blood would flow over the frenzied countess. Other young women, not yet sacrificed, played musical instruments at these deadly orgies. 650 young women are said to have died in the countess's castle. Countess Elizabeth Bathory, direct descendant Drake Bathory Kircher, is a Hungarian emigre living in New York near the end of the 20th century. He considers himself a failure at life. His relationships with women have been disasters. He is haunted by the Hungary of his youth, which he had to flee during the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. After the collapse of communism, he returned to Hungary to find his youth, but found instead something a lot more horrifying: the pervasive presence of his ancestor, Countess Bathory. When he returns to the United States, he confesses to a hideous crime before a New York magistrate. This exquisite novel is told through Drake's eyes as he searches for his roots and comes to terms with the gruesome part of his family history. The Blood Countess is an extraordinary tale of two epochs and people who are at odds with their times. The interconnected stories of Drake and Elizabeth are exquisitely blended into a suspenseful chronicle of timeless eroticism and a stunning tale of youth, aging, freedom, and power. The 16th century, with its murderous passions, incipient nationalism, clash of faiths, and changing ideas of the universe, gave birth to our own time, which is improved only in the efficacy of its killing tools. Countess Elizabeth Bathory sits at the center of this trans-temporal web, spinning her eternal fascination. So I don't know that this is actually a vampire book, but it is tangentially related to vampires, and that Elizabeth Bathory is often very much connected to vampires. The same way that Vlad the Impaler is often connected to vampires, because, Bram Stoker was loosely inspired by him when he made Dracula. People like to think, what if Vlad the Impaler was Dracula? Vampire Dracula, not just the fact that it was his name. People like to say, what if Elizabeth Bathory was a vampire? But I don't think that's what this book is doing. It doesn't sound like it. It just sounds like historical fiction mixed with literary fiction. So I'm still very intrigued by this. Thank you for sending it to me. I love historical stuff. And she does have a pretty cool name, if I do say so myself. So that's it for the vampire books, but I also have some vampire stuff. So sent to me all the way from across the pond is this Dracula, Bela Lugosi as Dracula, fully posable action figure by Reaction Figures. Very cool. This is based on the Universal Monster series. You can see on the back that they have Dracula, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, two Phantom of the Operas. We got regular Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera and Red Death Phantom of the Opera. The Wolfman, the Revenge of the Creature. So I guess that's like two Creatures of the Black Lagoon. They look very similar. I wonder why you would want both. One has shackles on it and the other doesn't. And the Mole People, which I'm totally unfamiliar with. I don't know anything about the Mole People. So, of course, I have Dracula. Thank you for sending this to me. They also sent me one of the Phantom of the Operas, because they are awesome, because I also collect Phantom of the Opera merchandise. I don't know if you know that about me, but I do. I want to take them out and play with them, but I also want to keep them forever in these containers. I'm really torn. Back when I used to collect Phantom of the Opera merchandise like a monster, I would always get two of each so I could have one to play with and one to keep. So whenever I do make that video of my entire Phantom of the Opera merchandise collection, you're going to see a lot of doubles of things that I have for that. So what do I do? If you didn't get the chance to see it last time, I have a brand new Bram Stoker bobblehead, which is so cool. Dacre Stoker gave me this when he came on my show to discuss his Bram Stoker signature shop on the website, which is where you can get this bobblehead along with some other Bram Stoker Dracula merchandise. Look how shaky he is. But yes, he has a place of honor in my vampire stuff collection now. You just agree with everything I say, don't you? Yes, you are so agreeable. Yeah, I know. Do you like my shirt? I made this shirt myself. This was kind of like my first attempt at making this shirt. I made another one, which was better, but it's in the wash because I wore it from my last video. It says "Good evening" in my font with a spider web and a bat, and the spider web is too white, so I made it over again with a gray spider web, and it looks much better. Still perfecting my shirt making technique. Yeah, thank you for the ideas you guys gave me for shirts. I'm still making shirts, and I'm going to use those ideas too. Yes, I also changed my hair. I know it looks black, but it's actually very dark blue, which if I ever went out in the dayball sunlight, you would be able to tell, but who are we kidding? That's never going to happen. Speaking of stuff I made, I'm going to share these with you just because I have no one else who would appreciate them. I'm just practicing crafting. And I made this shadow box which I'm trying not to let the light reflect on. It's a dimensional paper shadow box. I made it out of cutout paper, but there's a vampire, the haunted house, spooky trees, some skulls, like a mandala in the back. Can you see that? I made this with my own scissors. Actually, this design that I used for this originally had a werewolf right here, but I fixed it, replaced it with a vampire. I also made this cool bat, which is like just, you know, a bunch of pieces of cutout paper layered on top of each other. It's 3-dimensional. It's in a shadow box. I put vinyl on the edges. I'm very proud of my crafting. Please tell me I craft good because, you know, I'm a 5-year-old who needs approval. And then this is Grim Reaper with some ravens and some blue. The point of these things is that now I have more to put on the walls, my vampire lair, and I'm going to make more. If you have more ideas for things like this that I can make, give me ideas. You know, I'm kind of thinking of like starting an Etsy store, maybe. Am I going to be like an Etsy person? I could sell my shirts, sell my crafts. What do you think, Bram? Should I start an Etsy store? But Bram thinks I should start an Etsy store. Maybe. I'll think about it. Maybe next time. Thank you to everyone who sent me vampire books and things to my P.O. box. If you would like to send something as well, the address is in the description like always. If you like vampire books, you should join my vampire book club, or if you're already in it but you're not aware, the next book we are reading this month, right now, you have until the 13th of October to read it, is Vampire Hunter D, which, you know, everyone loves Vampire Hunter D. Join us, read it, and then I will do a live stream here on this channel discussing Vampire Hunter D around the 13th of the month, like I always do. So please join me to talk about more vampire books and help us vote on what book we'll read next. Will it be the new Twilight book? If it is, you only have yourself to blame, either by voting or not voting. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and read well. To read books? Yeah, I know you do. You like plays too, don't you? Yeah, I too like plays. There aren't enough vampire plays. You know, when I was in college, I directed a vampire play called Below the Waist that was about a vampire with a foot fetish going to a psychiatrist to help him with that. Yeah, that's what I did in college. Thank you to my Patreon patrons for supporting this channel. If you would like to help me make more videos, either of this type or my regular vampire reviews or the Let's Plays that I've been doing, I just started a new Let's Play of Coteries of New York, Vampire the Masquerade game visual novel with some very amusing voice acting between me and Paul playing that game. Consider joining my Patreon. Otherwise, just leave me comments for the algorithm and be one with the night. So, can you say kiss? Can you say good evening?
Cookie.
Sound like cookie, but okay.
Can you say, Seffi, who's that?
Baby.
Are you my baby?
Baby.
Can you say hi? Can you say welcome? Welcome?
I think she just wants a cookie.
Yay!
Sounds like a cookie.